The wind in New Mexico territory did not blow. It crawled. It dragged itself across the land like something wounded, carrying the smell of dry sage and old bone, and it had been doing so for 1,000 years before any white man arrived to give it a name. Caleb Ross rode into that wind. He was 41 years old. His back hurt. It always hurt, especially when the weather turned cold, which it was doing now in the late slant of October light. 2 years ago, a silver mine in Leadville, Colorado, had come down on top of him. 3 men died that day. Caleb did not. The doctor in Denver told him he would walk again if he was lucky. He was lucky. But he would never swing a pickaxe. He would never work a 10-hour shift underground. The mine was finished with him. So he did what broken men do. He went looking for land. The trail down into Silver Canyon dropped between 2 low mesas, the color of rust, the color of dried blood. Below in the basin, Caleb could see the outline of a ranch house and a barn and a small wooden corral. His ranch now, his land, bought 6 weeks ago in a saloon in Las Cruces with every dollar he had left to his name, $600, every cent from his mining settlement, every cent from selling his mother's wedding ring in St. Louis a year before. The deal had moved fast. Caleb remembered the lawyer, a heavy man with soft pink hands and a waistcoat too tight across the belly. Dorsey Pike. That was the name on the deed. Pike had smiled a great deal. He had poured whiskey. He had pushed paper across the table, 1 page, then another, the stack as thick as a family Bible. Sign here, sign here, sign here too. Caleb had signed. His back had been aching. The whiskey had been warm. He had not read the appendix. Nobody reads the appendix. Now, as his horse picked its way down the last of the trail, Caleb saw smoke rising from the chimney of the ranch house. He reined up. Smoke meant a fire. A fire meant a person. And the deed, as he understood it, said he was buying an empty property, a place a man could walk into and call his own. He rode closer. Slower now. His hand, out of old habit from the war, moved to the grip of the Colt at his hip. He had not fired that gun in 14 years. He hoped he would not have to fire it today. The ranch house was larger than he had pictured. A long, low building of pine logs, silvered by the sun, with a shingle roof and a broad porch, and 2 windows flanking a heavy front door. The barn beyond was still standing. The corral fence needed work, but was mostly sound. A well covered with a round wooden lid sat between the house and the barn, and a single cottonwood tree stood beside it, its leaves gone yellow and ready to fall. It was, Caleb realized, a good place. A man could live here. A man could end here. He dismounted slowly. His back locked up for a moment, and he waited, breathing through his teeth until it released him. Then he tied his horse to the cottonwood and walked to the porch. The door was not locked. He knocked anyway. Twice. Polite. No answer. He pushed the door open, and the world he thought he had bought ended right there on the threshold. 2 women stood in the center of the main room. They had been waiting. That was the thing he understood first. Not that they were Apache, although they were. Not that they were tall, although they were that too, taller than any women he had ever seen, taller than most men. What he understood first was that they had been standing there just like that for a long time. Hours, maybe, waiting for him to open the door. The older one spoke. Her voice was low and clear. The English was perfect, too perfect, as if she had practiced every word before he arrived. "Tonight, you must sleep, in the same bed, with both of us." Caleb did not move. His hand was still on the doorframe. "That is the contract," she said. "You signed it, before you walked through this door." The wind came in behind him, stirring the dust on the floorboards. Somewhere a cricket started its dry little song, then stopped as if embarrassed to be heard. The older woman held out a folded piece of sheepskin. It had a red wax seal. The seal had been broken and resealed at some point, the wax pressed down by a thumb. "Read it," she said. Caleb did not take it. Not yet. He looked at them. The older one had a scar. It ran from just below her right ear down along the line of her jaw and stopped at the point of her chin. A thin white line, old, fully healed. Her hair was black and heavy and fell past her shoulders. She wore a man's work shirt and a long canvas skirt. Her forearms bared to the elbow were corded with muscle. She was an inch or two taller than Caleb, who stood 5'11" on a good day. The younger one was his height. Her hair was tied back in a long tail. Her eyes were the color of wet stone. She carried no weapon that he could see, but Caleb had lived long enough to know that some people did not need to carry a weapon to be dangerous. Neither of them looked afraid. Neither of them looked angry either. They looked, he thought, like people who had done this before. He reached out and took the sheepskin. He carried it to the rough table by the window where the last of the afternoon light was falling in a long, slanted square. He unfolded it. His own hand shook just a little as he smoothed it flat. The smell of the paper was mineral and old. Someone had written on it in a careful schoolteacher's hand with ink that had turned the color of dried tobacco. Appendix D, Article 7. He read the words twice before they began to mean anything. The purchaser agrees to maintain the current living conditions on the property. This includes, but is not limited to, the sharing of the primary dwelling and sleeping quarters with the two current residents for a period of not less than 6 calendar months from the date of transfer. Violation of this clause shall result in the immediate nullification of the sale and the forfeiture of 100% of the purchase price. Below the paragraph in his own cramped hand was his signature, Caleb Ross. He had signed it. He could not deny that he had signed it. The ink was his. The slant of his letters was his. He remembered now dimly that there had been a page near the end of the stack that Pike had pushed toward him with the words, "Standard Territorial Clause," just formality, and he had signed without looking because his back was hurting and the whiskey was warm and he had wanted to be done. He set the sheepskin down on the table. He did not speak for a long moment. He was thinking about the cottonwood tree outside, the yellow leaves, the way a man could stand under a tree like that in the evening and watch the sun go down and feel just for a little while that he had arrived somewhere, that the long road was finally behind him. "I am not going to sleep with you," he said finally. He did not look up from the paper. "Either of you." The older woman did not answer. "I may lose the ranch," he said. "I understand that. But I want one night to understand what is happening in this house. After that, I will decide." He raised his eyes then. The older woman was watching him closely. Her face had not changed, but something behind her face had changed. A tightness, a small movement of the shoulders. She looked for the first time like a person instead of a statue. The younger one spoke. "You are the fourth man to buy this ranch in 4 years. Her voice was softer than her sister's, not kinder, softer, like a knife wrapped in cloth. "3 have come before you. All 3 signed. 2 of them are dead. The third one rode out at night and never came back. He left his horse, he left his boots by the door. He left without his boots." Caleb absorbed this. "What are your names?" he said. The older one hesitated, as if no one had asked her that in a long time. "Tashina," she said. "Winema," said the younger one. "Caleb Ross." He said it plainly, the way a man introduces himself at a funeral. "You already know my name," he added. "We know the name on the paper," Tashina said. "We do not know who you are." Outside, his horse shifted its weight and snorted. The sound carried through the open door. It was a familiar sound, a trail sound, and it steadied Caleb a little. He took a breath. "I will sleep in the barn tonight," he said. "We will talk in the morning." He turned to go. Then he stopped. He looked back at Tashina, at the scar along her jaw. "Who signed your name?" he said quietly. "On that paper." She did not answer, but Winema did. Her voice had dropped almost to a whisper. "The man who sold it to you," she said. 18 years ago. He signed for us the first time. He has been signing for us ever since." Caleb did not sleep. The barn was clean, which surprised him, and the straw was fresh, which surprised him more. There was a single army blanket folded on a shelf as if someone had laid it out in anticipation. He wrapped himself in it and lay on his back and stared up at the rafters, and he listened to the sounds of the ranch at night, the wind in the cottonwood, a coyote somewhere down the canyon calling and then another answering from the other side, the slow breathing of his own horse in the next stall. He thought about the paper. He thought about the scar on Tashina's jaw. He thought about the third man, the one who had left his boots by the door. At some point before dawn he understood that he was not going to ride out. He had known this from the moment he saw them standing in the middle of the room. He had known it before he read the paper. There was a thing in him old and stubborn that would not let him ride away from two women waiting in a house for a man to either save them or fail them. The war had put it in him. Or maybe it had been in him before the war, and the war had only shown him it was there. He got up while the sky was still black. He built a fire in the kitchen stove. He found a tin of ground coffee in the cupboard, older than it should have been, but still good. He made a pot strong enough to strip paint, and he poured 3 cups and he set them on the table. Then he waited. Tashina came out first. She had slept in her clothes. Her hair was still down. She stopped when she saw the 3 cups. She did not ask who the third one was for. She looked at it, and then at him, and then she sat down across from him. She did not thank him for the coffee, but she wrapped her hands around the cup as if she were warming them, even though her hands were not cold. Winema came out a minute later. She looked at the 2 cups and the third one between them, and she sat down in the third chair. She picked up the coffee. She tasted it. She set it back down. "You make it strong," she said. "Leadville coffee," Caleb said. "Miner's coffee." "I know Leadville," she said. He raised his eyebrows. "Our grandfather went there once," she said. "Before the war. He said white men drink tar and call it breakfast." Caleb almost smiled. He did not quite manage it, but the corner of his mouth moved and Tashina saw it, and something in her shoulders eased another small measure. The sun came up while they drank. It came up the way it does in the desert in late October, without warning, the whole sky going pale at once, and then the first red edge of it lifting over the mesa to the east and sending a long, warm bar of light across the kitchen floor. Tashina set her cup down. "You want to know?" she said. "Yes." "Then I will tell you." She spoke for a long time. Winema did not interrupt. Neither did Caleb. Outside the kitchen window the light climbed the wall of the canyon and the shadows pulled back, and a hawk began to turn slowly in a rising spiral above the mesa, and Tashina told the story of her family. Her grandfather's name was Standing Bear. That was his name in English. He was the head man of a small Chiricahua band that had never gone to war against the United States. They had been a peaceful people. They hunted, they traded. They lived in this canyon and the one to the north of it for longer than anyone could remember. In 1868, when the government was making treaties, Standing Bear signed one, a small treaty, not famous, not in any history book. It gave his family the permanent right to this land, Silver Canyon, a square of ground about 200 acres with water, with grass, with a seam of good pine on the north slope. Permanent. That was the word in the treaty. Forever. In perpetuity. As long as the rivers flow. Standing Bear was a tall man. He had been unusually tall for an Apache, and his children had been tall and their children also. Tashina and Winema had gotten their height from him. It was a family thing, not a tribe thing. Caleb understood this the way Tashina said it, as if she had explained it many times before to people who assumed the wrong thing. Standing Bear died in the winter of 1879. Tashina had been 27. Winema had been 23. Their mother had died of a fever the year before. Their father had been killed in a cavalry skirmish a long way from here when Winema was still a baby. They were alone. And then, 2 weeks after their grandfather's burial, a man rode into the canyon. A young man, in a good suit, with a clean-shaven face and a lawyer's satchel under one arm. Dorsey Pike. He had papers. He said he was there to help them. He said the government required certain forms after the death of a treaty signer to make sure the land passed correctly to the heirs. He read them a paragraph from a book. The paragraph sounded official. Tashina was 16. She did not know how to read English, not then. Winema was 12. She could not read at all. They signed. They signed their names with X marks because that was all they knew how to do. Dorsey Pike folded the papers and put them in his coat and rode away and came back a month later with a deed in his own name. He did not take the land from them, not exactly. He said they could stay. He said it was their home. He said he would protect them from the other white men who might come because the territory was dangerous for Apache women alone, especially tall ones, especially pretty ones. He said all of this with his fingers laced together in his lap, the smile never quite leaving his mouth. And then he began to sell the ranch. The first buyer came in 1882, a cattleman from Texas. He was drunk most of the time. He made Tashina cook for him. He made Winema clean the house. He never touched them, but he talked about it. He talked about it every night at the dinner table in front of them to himself, the way a man talks about a horse he is thinking of breaking. He died after 8 months, a rattlesnake in his boot. They buried him behind the barn. Dorsey Pike came and took back the ranch and sold it again. The second buyer came in 1884. Tashina stopped talking for a moment. Winema put her hand on her sister's forearm, just laid it there, did not squeeze. "You do not have to," Winema said in their own language. Caleb did not speak Apache, but he understood the shape of what she said. He looked down at his coffee. "I will," Tashina said in English. "He needs to hear it." She did not look at Caleb when she said the next part. The second man did not talk about it. He did it, or he tried. The first night. He came into my room. She paused. I had a knife. I had been carrying it for 2 years since our grandfather died. I had slept with it under my pillow every night. I did not know what I would do with it if the time came. I only knew I would do something. She touched the scar on her jaw with 2 fingers, lightly. Before he could reach me, I cut my own face. I thought if I was ugly enough, he would stop. I was 27 when our grandfather died. But by then I was 29 and I was already tall, and men had already told me I was beautiful, and I hated it. I wanted to be ugly. I wanted to be nothing he would want. She stopped. He did not stop. Winema's hand tightened on her sister's arm. "I used the knife," Tashina said. "On him. Not on myself the second time. On him. He did not walk out of this house. We buried him behind the barn next to the Texan. Dorsey Pike came 3 weeks later to check on the property. He saw the fresh dirt. We told him the truth. We thought he would bring the law." She looked up now. Her eyes were dry. He laughed. Caleb did not move. "He laughed," Tashina said again, "and he said, 'Good. That is one less witness.' He said, 'You understand now, girls. You understand what you are. You belong to this land, and this land belongs to me, and if you ever run, I will find you, and I will tell the marshal that you murdered a white man in his bed, and they will hang you, both of you, because nobody in this territory will believe an Apache woman over a white lawyer.' And then," Winema said softly, picking up the story, "he added the clause." Caleb looked at her. "The clause about sleeping," she said. "He put it in the contract after the second man. He said it would save him trouble. He said the kind of man who would sign a paper like that was the kind of man who would not last long here. They would run, or they would drink themselves to death, or they would cross one of us and end up behind the barn with the others." "The third man," Caleb said, "the one who left his boots." Winema nodded. "He signed. He came inside. He read the clause. He laughed the way Pike laughed. He said, 'Tonight, girls.' He went to the barn to put his horse up. He did not come back. We waited an hour. We went to look. The barn was empty. His boots were by the door, still by the door. He had run out the back of the barn in his stocking feet. We never saw him again. Dorsey Pike came 2 weeks later and sold the ranch again." There was a long silence. Caleb looked down at the sheepskin which was still folded on the table between them. "So the clause," he said slowly, "the sleeping clause, it is not." He stopped. He was trying to find the right word. "It is not the point," Tashina said. "It has never been the point. It is a test. Dorsey Pike uses it to find out what kind of man you are. If you are the first kind, the kind who wants it, you come into our rooms and you die. If you are the second kind, the kind who is ashamed, you run in the night. Either way, the ranch goes back to him and he sells it again and he makes his $300 profit and the years go by." Caleb breathed out. "And you," he said. "You stay. Because we have nowhere else to go," Winema said. "Our people are on a reservation in Arizona. We are not on the rolls. Our grandfather's band was too small. We would be arrested if we tried to join them. We would be shot if we tried to live in any town. We are tall Apache women in New Mexico Territory in 1886. There is no door in this country that opens for us. Except this one, Tashina said. Caleb was quiet for a long time. He thought about the paper, the appendix, the signature he had not read. He thought about Dorsey Pike's soft pink hands pushing the whiskey across the table. He thought about a little man in Las Cruces smiling and smiling as he sold for the 4th time the same cursed piece of ground to the same kind of broken fool. He thought about the Leadville mine. He thought about the 3 men who had died in the mine. Young men. One of them had been 23 years old. His name was Elijah. He had shared his lunch with Caleb on a day when Caleb had no money and no food, and he had laughed about it, and he had said, "You pay me back when you are rich, Ross," which Caleb was never going to be. Elijah had died under 40 tons of granite and broken timber. Caleb had lived. There were nights in Leadville after the collapse when Caleb would wake up at 3 in the morning with his chest crushed under a weight that was not there. He would sit up on the edge of the bed in his rented room above the hardware store, and he would breathe in and out until the panic passed, and then he would count his fingers in the dark. 10. Still 10. He would say the names of the dead men out loud once each, the way a man reads a list at a funeral. Elijah Belknap, Samuel Courtright, Tom Weaver. 3 names, 3 beats. Then he would lie back down and stare at the ceiling until dawn. He had done this every night for 2 years. He had done it the night before he bought the ranch, in a boarding house in Las Cruces. The ceiling had been pressed tin with a water stain in the shape of a horse. He had not expected the counting to ever stop. He was not sure he deserved for it to stop. Caleb had never understood why he had lived. He had asked God for 2 years why. God had not answered. Caleb had come to believe that God did not answer that question for anyone, and the waiting for the answer was the whole of a man's life after a mine came down on him. He looked at Tashina. He looked at Winema. He thought maybe this is why. It was not a noble thought. It was not a brave thought. It was the small, tired thought of a man who had run out of reasons and was looking in the coffee steam of an Apache kitchen for one last one. "There is more to the paper," he said. "Isn't there?" Tashina's eyes narrowed slightly. "How did you know?" "Because Pike is greedy," Caleb said. "And a greedy man does not stop at $300 4 times. There is another clause, a clause he does not want anyone to find." Winema and Tashina looked at each other. Then Winema rose. She went into the back room. Caleb heard her lift a floorboard. She came back with a second piece of sheepskin older than the first thinner. The ink on it faded almost to nothing. She laid it flat on the table next to the contract. "Our grandfather left this with the priest in Mesilla," she said, "before he died. The priest gave it to us when we turned 18. It is the real treaty, the one from 1868, the one Pike has been hiding for 18 years. Caleb bent over it. The English was old-fashioned and full of curls, but he could read it. He found what he was looking for halfway down the page. "Here," he said. He put his finger on the line. "Read this." Winema read aloud haltingly. "The said allotment shall pass upon the death of the signatory to his heirs in direct descent. Said heirs shall hold the allotment in perpetuity. Should the allotment be conveyed by sale or by lease to any person or persons, the new holder shall be required to maintain continuous and uncontested residence for a period of not less than 6 calendar months. Upon the expiration of said period, full and clear title shall vest in the new holder, and the previous encumbrances shall be dissolved, including any and all claims upon the persons of the heirs, who shall thereafter be deemed free and sovereign citizens of the United States, with full rights of inheritance to any remaining family property." Winema stopped reading. Caleb looked up. Tashina's mouth was slightly open. 6 months, Caleb said. "If I stay 6 months, without violating the contract, the ranch becomes mine, and you." He could not quite finish. "We become free," Winema said. Her voice sounded very young. "Free," Tashina said. She said it as if she had never said the word out loud in English before. Caleb sat back in his chair. His back spasmed. He let it. "Dorsey Pike does not know about this clause," he said. "He knows the treaty exists," Winema said. "He knows our grandfather signed one, but he has never seen this page. The priest kept it for 18 years. Pike thinks his forged papers are the only papers. Has any of the other 3 men read it? No, we never showed them. We did not trust them. Why show me? They did not answer at first. Then Tashina spoke. Because you brought 3 cups to the table this morning, she said. Not 2, 3. And when you brought them, you did not wait to see if we would come out. You poured the coffee and you sat down and you waited, like a man who already knew we were people. Caleb did not say anything to that. He could not. He looked down at the 2 papers on the table, the forged contract, the real treaty, 18 years of lies and 1 folded sheet of truth that had been hidden under a floorboard for most of that time. He picked up his coffee cup. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. 6 months, he said. 6 months, Tashina said. He will come. He will come. He will try to break me, or kill me, or drive me off. Yes. Probably all 3. Yes. Caleb set the cup down. Outside, the hawk that had been turning above the mesa finished its spiral and dropped, falling like a thrown stone towards something in the grass, something small and unaware, and the sun climbed another inch, and the day that would change all 3 of their lives forever began to properly begin. Then we had better get to work, he said. Tashina looked at him a long moment. You are not what we expected, she said. No, Caleb said. I am not what I expected either. He stood up. His back complained. He ignored it. Show me the ranch, he said. Show me every fence, every building, every place a man could hide. If Dorsey Pike is coming, I want to know the ground before he does. Tashina stood. She was taller than him by just a little, and for the first time since he had opened the door the day before, Caleb let himself really look at her. Not at her height, not at the scar, at her. At the weight of 18 years in her face and the thin, hard thread of something that had not quite broken in all that time. She held out her hand. Not to shake, to take the sheepskin back. He gave it to her. She folded it carefully and slid it into the front of her shirt against her heart where it would stay until this was over one way or the other. Come, she said, I will show you the ground. And Caleb Ross, 41 years old, a broken miner from Colorado, with $600 spent and 6 months to live or die, and followed 2 tall Apache women out the door of the ranch house he did not yet own into the long cold light of a New Mexico morning that smelled of sage and of something else. Something he had not smelled in a very long time. It smelled a little like hope. 2 months passed. 2 months is not a long time when measured against a life. It is a long time when measured against a promise. Caleb Ross learned this the way a man learns the weight of a coat he cannot take off slowly and in the shoulders first. The ranch changed. Not fast. The way old wood changes after you oil it. The way a horse changes after you feed it properly for 30 days. Quiet changes. Caleb mended the corral fence. He rehung the barn door. He dug out the well which had been half choked with leaves and a drowned raven, and he lined the top course with fresh stone. Tashina worked beside him most days. She could lift more than he could. She did not pretend otherwise, and she did not make a show of it, and when he struggled with a length of cottonwood that was too heavy for his back, she simply took the other end without being asked. Winema ran the house. She cooked. She mended. She kept a ledger on brown butcher paper of everything they owned and everything they owed. She could read and write better than Caleb had expected. A missionary woman in Mesilla had taught her years ago, before Dorsey Pike had figured out that a literate Apache girl was a dangerous thing. After that, Winema had hidden her letters. She had pretended not to know. She had been pretending for 15 years. She was done pretending now. At night, the 3 of them ate at the same table. Not together exactly. Not yet. The sisters sat on one side. Caleb sat on the other. Nobody spoke much. The lamp guttered. The wind moved around the house like something pacing. And when the meal was done, Tashina would nod and Winema would nod, and Caleb would go out to the barn to sleep. He had not slept in the house. Not one night. That was his own rule. He had told them on the second morning, "You have rooms. You keep them. I will sleep in the barn until the 6 months are up. After that, if you want to talk about where I sleep, we will talk. Not before." Tashina had looked at him a long time when he said that. She had not answered. But that night when he went out to the barn, he found the army blanket had been replaced with two heavy wool ones, and a small cast-iron stove had been moved into the corner of his stall with a length of stovepipe run up through the roof. He had not asked for it. Neither of the women mentioned it then or ever. That was how things went between them those first 2 months. On a Tuesday in late November, Caleb rode into Silver Canyon for supplies. The town sat in a shallow basin where two dry washes came together, a main street about 3 blocks long, a church at one end, a saloon at the other, a courthouse in the middle, 2 stories of square-cut stone with a flag that did not quite reach the top of its pole. The rest was adobe and pine weathered to the color of old leather, and the whole place smelled of wood smoke and horse and the particular dust that a high desert town makes when nothing has rained for a month. Caleb tied his horse in front of the general store. He went in. The bell above the door rang once. A woman behind the counter looked up. She was perhaps 55, with iron gray hair pulled back in a tight knot, a long black dress, and a face that had been handsome once, and was now simply set the way a jaw gets set when it has learned not to tremble. She looked at Caleb. Her mouth did not change, but something in her eyes did, a small flinch, as if she had been struck lightly and was pretending she had not. "You must be the new man at the Silver Canyon place," she said. Her voice was steady. "Yes, ma'am, Caleb Ross." Ada Belknap. She did not offer her hand. She glanced once quickly at the window behind him, checking the street. Then she looked back at him. "What do you need?" He told her. Flour, beans, coffee, a can of lamp oil, a spool of heavy thread. He needed a new bit for his horse if she had one. He needed cornmeal. He needed 20-penny nails. She gathered the things without speaking. She moved fast for a woman her age. When she set the last of it on the counter, she did not tell him the price. She was still looking at the window. "Mr. Ross," she said quietly. "Ma'am, you are going to need to come back here one afternoon soon when the street is empty, around 3 o'clock. That is when the courthouse lets out for the day and the saloon has not yet filled up. The store will be empty. I will be here. I will have tea on the stove." She paused. "I have something to tell you, about the house you bought, about the man who sold it to you. I cannot tell you now. Too many ears in this town. Do you understand?" Caleb looked at her. The flinch was still in her eyes, but there was something else in them now, too. Something that had been waiting a long time to be allowed out. "I understand," he said. 3 o'clock, she said. "Not before, not after." "Yes, ma'am." She rang up the total. Caleb paid. He loaded the supplies on his pack mule. He walked out of the store and across the dusty street to the courthouse because there was one more thing he had come to town to do. He had come to see a judge. Judge Hollis Vane was in his office. Caleb knew this because the court clerk, a thin young man with ink on his fingers, said so with a small apologetic smile. But the clerk added the judge was not seeing anyone today. The judge was very busy. Caleb said he would wait. He sat in the hall outside the judge's door. 2 hours. The clerk brought him a glass of water once and apologized again and went away. Nobody went in or out of the judge's office. At one point Caleb heard very faintly the sound of a man weeping behind the door. It lasted for perhaps a minute. Then it stopped. At the end of the second hour, the door opened. Judge Hollis Vane was a heavy man, bald, red-faced, with a beard trimmed close along the jaw. His waistcoat was stained with sweat under the arms, even though the day was cool. He stepped into the hall. He saw Caleb. For just a moment, the judge's face did something complicated. Not surprise. Recognition. The recognition of a man who had been told hours ago exactly who was waiting in the hall and who had spent the last 2 hours deciding what to do about it. He decided. "Mr. Ross," he said. He produced a smile. The smile did not reach his eyes. "I am terribly sorry. I have been called out. A matter in Mesilla. I leave within the hour. Please come back another day." "It is about a treaty," Caleb said, "from 1868. The judge's smile did not move, but his hand hanging at his side tightened into a fist. Caleb saw it. The judge did not know he saw it. "I do not handle treaty matters," the judge said. "Those are federal, Santa Fe, perhaps the marshal's office." It is a specific treaty, Your Honor. It concerns a piece of land that I now own. Then I suggest you take it up with the man who sold it to you." The judge turned. He began to walk away. Caleb spoke quietly to his back. "The man who sold it to me is named Dorsey Pike. Did you know, Your Honor, that his legal name used to be Dorsey Vane?" The judge stopped walking. For a full 3 seconds he did not move. Then he turned around very slowly. His face had gone the color of ash under the red. His hand was no longer a fist. His hand was trembling. "Go home, Mr. Ross," he said. His voice was so quiet Caleb had to lean forward to hear it. "Go home and pack your things and leave this territory. You do not know what you have walked into. You will not survive it. Believe me, I have watched 3 men before you try." "So have I, Your Honor." Caleb stood up. "I will say good day to you." He walked past the judge down the stairs and out of the courthouse. Behind him in the upstairs hall, Hollis Vane stood very still for a long time, one hand pressed flat against the wall as if he needed the wall to hold him up. Caleb rode home in the last of the afternoon light. He did not tell the sisters about Ada Belknap. Not yet. There was a thing he wanted to understand first, and he could not understand it without the woman's tea. What he told them at dinner that night was about the judge. Tashina listened without eating. When Caleb was done, she set her fork down very carefully. "Dorsey Vane," she said. "He changed his name in 1871, Caleb said. "The judge is his brother. Half-brother is my guess. Different fathers, same mother. But blood the kind that matters." Winema was staring at the lamp. "For 18 years, she said, we have been living on a ranch owned by a lawyer whose brother runs the court that would judge any case we ever brought. We have been losing to the same man twice every time." "Yes. That is why no buyer has ever won." "Yes. That is why my grandfather's treaty was never honored." "Yes." She closed her eyes. Tashina put a hand over her sister's on the table. She did not speak. Caleb watched them for a moment, and then he stood up and went out to the barn to sleep, because there are times when the kindest thing a man can do is leave a room. The next week he rode back to town. 3 o'clock. The street was empty, as Ada had said it would be. The saloon had not yet opened for the evening. The courthouse had let out an hour earlier, the clerks and the secretaries gone home to their suppers. Caleb tied his horse in the alley behind the store, not out front, and he went in through the back. Ada Belknap was waiting. She was alone. The front door was bolted. A small enameled kettle was steaming on the stove in the corner. 2 cups sat on the counter. She poured. She did not speak until they were both sitting at a small table in the back room, which had a single window curtained with faded gingham. The window looked out on the alley, not the street. Ada had chosen the room on purpose. She had been choosing it on purpose for years. She began without preamble. "My husband's name was Tobias Belknap. He was the court clerk in this town for 22 years. He kept the records. He filed the papers. He knew every deed, every mortgage, every will that passed through that courthouse. He was a careful man. He was a good man. He was the kind of man who could not sleep at night if he knew something wrong was sitting in his files." She took a small sip of her tea. Her hand was steady. 7 years ago, in the summer of 1879, he found the original copy of the 1868 treaty, the Standing Bear Treaty. It had been misfiled. Deliberately, he thought, stuck in a folder about a cattle dispute from 1873. He pulled it out. He read it. He read it 3 times. And then he came home and he sat in that chair you were sitting in, and he told me that Dorsey Pike had been running a fraud on 2 Apache girls for the better part of a decade. She paused. "I told him to put it back. I told him to file it somewhere it would never be found again. I told him we had a son in Colorado and a life here, and the law in this territory was not the kind of law that would protect a clerk who crossed a man like Pike." Her mouth tightened. "My husband was not a man who could put things back." Caleb waited. "He made a copy," Ada said. "1 copy, ink and paper in his own hand at this table on a Sunday night. He put the original back in the courthouse file exactly where he had found it so no one would know he had seen it. The copy he gave to me. He said, 'Ada, if anything happens to me, you hold on to this. You do not give it to anyone until you are certain.' Certain of what I asked him. 'Certain the right person has come,' he said. I asked him how I would know." She looked up at Caleb. He said, "You will know because he will not ask for it. He will not even know it exists." Caleb set his tea down. "What happened to your husband, Mrs. Belknap?" 4 days after that Sunday, she said, Tobias went hunting on the mesa north of town. He was a good hunter. He had been hunting that mesa for 20 years. They brought him back in a wagon. They said his rifle had discharged accidentally while he was climbing a rock fall. They said the ball had passed through his throat from below. They said it was a tragedy, and the town was sorry, and the funeral was held on a Thursday. She stopped. Her eyes were dry, but her voice had gone very quiet. "I have had the copy for 7 years, Mr. Ross. It has been in the bottom of that tin under the black tea since the day my husband was buried. Every morning for 7 years I have opened that tin for my breakfast, and I have seen the edge of it, and I have closed the tin again. Because I did not know. I did not know who to give it to. Every man who bought that ranch I looked at, and every man was the wrong man. Until last week when you walked through my door, and I saw your face." She reached across the table. She put her hand on his. The gesture was so unexpected that Caleb did not move. "Mr. Ross," she said. Her voice wavered for the first time. "I need to ask you a question, and you must answer me truthfully. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Did you ever work at a silver mine in Leadville, Colorado, in 1884? Caleb felt the room shift under him. "Yes," he said slowly. "I did, for 3 years, until the collapse. The collapse in October." "Yes." 3 men died in that collapse, Mr. Ross. Is that right?" "Yes, ma'am." "One of them was 23 years old." Caleb could not speak. "One of them," Ada said, "wrote letters home to his mother, to this store, every week for 2 years. And in the last letter, the one that came after he was already in the ground, he wrote about a quiet, older man who worked his shift. A miner with a bad back who never talked much. A man who once shared his last biscuit on a payday when the money had not come through so that my son would not go hungry." She was crying now, not loudly, not theatrically. The tears came out of her eyes and ran down her face, and she did not wipe them. "My son's name was Elijah Belknap." Caleb's throat closed. He did not remember putting his other hand over hers. He only realized later that he had done it, and that he had held it there for a long time, while an old woman who had been waiting for 7 years in a back room in a dying town cried quietly into her tea. "I did not know," he said finally. "I did not know his mother." "He never told you?" "He said his folks were in New Mexico. He did not say where. He talked about going home." He was going to, in the spring. He had saved his wages. He was going to come and help me run the store. "Ma'am." "Do not say you are sorry, Mr. Ross. Everyone says they are sorry. Everyone who survives. I do not need a sorry." She withdrew her hand. She wiped her face with the edge of her sleeve. She stood up. She crossed the room to a shelf, and she took down a tin box with a picture of a Scottish castle on the lid, and she brought it back to the table. She opened it. She lifted out a tea canister, black tea. She turned the canister over and tapped it, and a piece of folded paper fell out onto the tablecloth. It was thin, it was old, the ink had gone brown. She slid it across to him. "Take it," she said. "Take it, and use it, and do not let my husband have died for nothing, and do not let my son have shared his biscuit for nothing. You are going to save those 2 girls, Mr. Ross, or you are going to die trying. And if you die trying, I will bury you next to Tobias, and I will tell every person in this town out loud in broad daylight on the front steps of that courthouse exactly what Dorsey Pike is." Caleb took the paper. His hand was steady, though he did not know how. "I will not die, Mrs. Belknap. You might. I might. But I will not die without taking him down first." She looked at him a long moment. "Drink your tea," she said. "It has gotten cold. That is a sin in this house." It was late when Caleb rode back to the ranch. The stars were out. The Milky Way lay across the sky like spilled flour. His horse knew the road. He let the reins go slack. In the inner pocket of his coat against his chest, the copied treaty rested folded, small, wrapped in oilcloth. 2 copies now, one in Tashina's shirt, one in his own. He understood riding through that cold, clear night that the thing he was carrying had already killed one good man. It would try to kill him too. It would try to kill all of them. A piece of paper with some old ink on it, and for this piece of paper 3 people were going to have to bet their lives. He was ready to bet his. What he was not ready for was the next 4 weeks. In the second week of December, 3 men rode into the canyon. They came at mid-morning in plain clothes on good horses. They were not from Silver Canyon. Caleb had never seen them before. They reined up at the gate and called out, and Caleb walked out to meet them with his colt on his hip and his hands open. The leader was a lean man in a gray coat. He had a badge pinned inside the coat, not visible from a distance, but he turned his lapel deliberately so that Caleb could see it when he got close. "Territorial Collections," the man said. "You are Caleb Ross." "I am." "You owe $400 on this property, Mr. Ross. A lien filed in Las Cruces by a Mr. Dorsey Pike, dated the 15th of September, overdue as of the 1st of December. I am here to collect or to take possession, whichever comes first." Caleb stood very still. "I paid $600 for this property in September," he said. "Cash, in full. I have the deed." The deed does not speak to unsecured debts attached to the property at the time of transfer. Those transfer with the land, Mr. Ross. You should have read your papers." "There was no lien in my papers." The lean man smiled thinly. "It was filed the day after your purchase, dated the day before, a common practice, not illegal in this territory. You may take it up with a judge." "Which judge?" The man did not answer. He did not need to. Caleb looked at the other 2 men. They were armed. They were not lawmen. They were the kind of men that certain lawmen ride with when the lawful thing and the profitable thing have started to walk in the same direction. He did not have $400. He had in cash $11.60. He thought about the 15 bars of silver in the cellar under the barn. He did not move toward them, not yet. Because once Dorsey Pike knew that silver existed, it would never stop. They would tear the ranch apart looking for more. They would tear the sisters apart. Silver was the match you did not strike until the kindling was ready. Caleb spoke slowly. "I will need 3 days." The lean man tilted his head. "3 days for what, Mr. Ross?" "3 days to sell my horse and some of my stock. I will bring the money to you in Las Cruces on the 20th. The man considered. "The 20th, he said. "Not 1 day later. Or the ranch goes to auction, and I expect Mr. Pike will be the only bidder." "The 20th. Good day to you." They rode out. Caleb stood at the gate for a long time after the dust had settled. Then he walked back to the house. Tashina was waiting on the porch. She had heard everything. Winnemah was inside at the window, her hand pressed flat against the glass. "You are going to sell your horse," Tashina said. "No." "Then what?" "I am going to sell something else." He did not say what. That night, after the sisters had gone to bed, Tashina came out to the barn. She did not knock. The barn door was already open. She walked in. She found Caleb sitting on a hay bale staring at the floor where the trap to the cellar was hidden under a scatter of straw. She sat down on the bale next to him, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the heat of her shoulder. "I have been thinking," she said. "About what?" "About the silver." "I am not using the silver." "I know. That is what I have been thinking about. You are not going to use it, not for this. Because if you use it, he will know, and everything we have done for 2 months will have been for nothing." "Yes." "So you will sell your horse instead?" "Yes." "You love that horse, Caleb Ross." He did not answer. "That horse carried you here. That horse is the only thing you brought from Colorado that was still alive. And you are going to sell him to a man in Las Cruces for a fraction of what he is worth, because if you do not, Dorsey Pike wins." "Yes." She was quiet a moment. Then she said in a voice he had not quite heard from her before, "I do not like this." "I do not like it either. I want to use the silver. 2 bars, just 2. It would cover the lien. He would not know. He would know. He would see $400 in cash in my hand a month after I rode in here with 11. He would know. Then I want to kill him." She said it plainly. Caleb turned his head and looked at her. She was staring at the floor. Her jaw was set. The scar along it caught the lantern light. "If I kill him," she said, "none of this matters. No treaty, no 6 months, no lien. He is dead. And a dead man does not sell ranches, and a dead man does not put liens on property, and a dead man cannot touch my sister or me ever again. He has a brother, Tashina, the judge, and the judge has a court, and if Dorsey Pike dies, the court comes for you, and they hang you. I have killed before. I know. I am not afraid of it. I know. But you are afraid for me." Caleb did not answer right away. Outside, a wind moved across the canyon. It was the kind of wind that carries the first cold of real winter. The lantern flickered. Tashina's shadow, very tall on the barn wall, flickered with it. "Yes," he said finally, "I am afraid for you." She turned her head. She looked at him. Really looked. For the first time maybe since he had arrived, not as a buyer, not as a test, not as the fourth man, as a man, as Caleb. She did not kiss him. She did not touch him. That was not what it was. She put her forehead very briefly against his shoulder, the way a horse rests its head against the neck of another horse it has chosen to trust. 2 seconds. 3. Then she sat up straight again, and she stood up and she walked to the door. At the door, she stopped. "Sell your horse," she said. "I will find you another when this is over, a better one, an Apache horse. You have never ridden a real horse until you have ridden an Apache horse." And then she was gone. Caleb sat on the bale a long time after that. He sold his horse in Las Cruces on the 19th of December. He got $310 for it, which was less than it was worth, and he borrowed the rest from Ada Belknap, who counted $90 out of a jar behind her counter and pressed it into his hand and said, "Do not thank me, Mr. Ross, or I will take it back." He walked the 50 miles home in 3 days, carrying his saddle over one shoulder and his rifle over the other because he could not afford the stage. He paid the lien on the 20th. The lien man in Las Cruces took the money without comment. He wrote a receipt. He handed it over. He said as Caleb turned to go, "Mr. Pike will be very surprised to see this receipt." Caleb did not answer. He walked home. 3 months gone. 3 months to go. On a cold, still evening in the last week of December, Winema came and found him at the well. He was drawing water for the horses. His hands were numb. His back was a knot. He had not slept well in a week. She stood watching him for a moment. "I need to tell you something," she said. He set the bucket down. "All right. I have been keeping something back. From you. From my sister, too, a little. I need to tell you now because it matters and because you are running out of time. Tell me." She drew in a breath. "Dorsey Pike has a brother." "The judge, I know." "Not the judge. Another brother. An older one. His name is in the back of the 1868 treaty on a page I did not show you. He was a witness to the signing. He was an Army scout back then. He knew our grandfather. He was there the day the treaty was signed, and he put his name to it as witness, and then he went back east, and we never heard of him again." Caleb went very still. "His name?" "Micah Vane. Micah. He lives in St. Louis now. He is an attorney, a real one. He works for the Department of the Interior on Indian land claims. He has been doing it for 25 years. He is the reason the 1868 treaty exists at all, because he drafted it himself. And he does not know Caleb Ross. He does not know what his brothers have done out here. He does not know our grandfather is dead. He does not know we exist." Caleb stared at her. "Winema. I have his address. Our grandfather gave it to me before he died. He said if the treaty is ever broken, find this man. He is the one who kept his word. He is the only one." "You have had this address for 7 years?" "Yes." "And you did not." "I did not write to him, Caleb Ross, because I could not read or write well enough to write such a letter, and because my sister told me it was a dream of an old man who was dying, and because even if it was real, a letter from an Apache girl to a lawyer in St. Louis would never arrive. It would be opened, it would be thrown away, or it would be given to his brothers, and then we would be dead. But now there is you, a white man, a buyer. with a deed in his name and a grievance against Dorsey Pike and a copy of the treaty and a receipt proving that a lien was paid. You can write a letter that will be opened. You can write a letter that will be read." Caleb understood. He understood the weight of it. He understood what it would mean. A letter to St. Louis. A letter to a third brother, a lawyer brother who did not know that his own blood had spent 18 years running a confidence game on 2 Apache orphans out here in the dry country. He understood also what Winema had just given him. Not information. Trust. The kind of trust that takes 7 years of hiding something under your tongue before you are ready to say it. "All right," he said. His voice was hoarse. "All right, I will write the letter. Tonight. We have no paper. Ada Belknap has paper. I will go tomorrow." "He may not come. It has been 25 years. He may be old. He may be dead. He may be. He may be the same as his brothers. He may be. Then why?" Caleb looked at her, at the thin, strong face, at the eyes that were the color of wet stone. "Because," he said slowly, "your grandfather told you to find him, and your grandfather was right about the treaty, and he was right about the priest, and he was right about hiding the silver, and he was right about waiting for the 4th man. He was right about everything, Winema. So we will trust that he was right about Micah Vane, too." She nodded. Once. She walked back toward the house. Halfway there she stopped. She turned around. "Caleb Ross." "Yes." "The 4th man was not a guess. Our grandfather said there would be 4. He said the first 3 will break. The 4th will hold. He said the 4th would be a man who had lost everything and who would therefore have nothing left to be afraid of. He said we would know him by the way he drank his coffee." She paused. "He said, you will offer him a cup and he will not take it. He will take 3 cups, and he will set the 3rd one down for no one because he has not yet understood that he is waiting for someone." She looked at him a long moment across the dark yard. "He was ready for you, Caleb Ross. He was ready for you 18 years ago. We have only been waiting." Then she turned and went into the house. Caleb stood at the well with the bucket at his feet for a long time. The stars wheeled overhead. The cold came up from the ground through the soles of his boots. His back was a fist of pain between his shoulder blades, and he did not feel it because he was thinking about an old Apache man dying in a cold winter cabin in 1879, whispering directions to a 12-year-old granddaughter, naming a white lawyer in St. Louis she must find. Naming, too, a man he had never met. A man who had not yet lost his wife. A man who had not yet gone to Leadville. A man who had not yet been crushed by 40 tons of broken rock. A man who would 7 years later knock on a door in Silver Canyon and bring 3 cups of coffee to a kitchen table before the women came out. Caleb picked up the bucket. He carried the water to the horses. He went to the barn. He sat at the small plank desk he had built that week from scrap lumber. He lit the lantern. He took out his pencil because he had no ink, and on the back of a feed store receipt because he had no paper, he began to compose in his clumsy, careful hand the draft of a letter he would copy out fair the next morning on Ada Belknap's best stationery. "Dear Mr. Vane, my name is Caleb Ross. I am a rancher in New Mexico Territory. I am writing to you on behalf of 2 women you have never met. Their grandfather was a man named Standing Bear, who signed a treaty with the United States in 1868, to which I am told you were a witness. There is a matter of that treaty I must bring to your attention. It concerns your brothers." He wrote through the night. In the house, Tashina lay awake in her room and looked at the ceiling. Winema lay awake in hers. Neither of them slept. And 100 miles to the south, in a large adobe house in Las Cruces, Dorsey Pike sat at a mahogany desk with a glass of brandy and a receipt in his hand, and he stared at the signature of the territorial collections officer, and he began for the first time in 18 years to be afraid. He did not yet know why. He would learn. The letter went out on the 2nd day of January. Caleb gave it to Ada Belknap. Ada gave it to the stage driver, a man named Pete Harrow, who had run the Las Cruces to El Paso route for 16 years, and who had owed Tobias Belknap a favor once, and who therefore owed Ada the same favor now, because some men keep their debts past the grave. The letter went from El Paso by rail. From St. Louis it would be answered, or it would not. Caleb did not know which. He could not know. A letter takes 3 weeks to reach St. Louis, and a reply takes 3 weeks to come back, and in the meantime the 5th month of the 6th was beginning, and Dorsey Pike had gone very quiet, and a man like Dorsey Pike going quiet was the thing you feared most. The first snow fell on the 10th of January. It came in thin and sideways, not deep just enough to silver the roof of the barn and whiten the dry grass along the fences. Caleb was splitting kindling by the woodpile when the flakes started. He stood up. He watched the snow come down for a full minute. He could not remember the last time he had simply stood and watched something fall from the sky. Then he heard a horse on the road. One horse. Coming slow. Not Dorsey. Dorsey never came alone. Caleb set the axe down. He walked to the gate. The rider was a man he did not know. Middle-aged, thin, Mexican by his hat and his saddle. He sat his horse like a man who had ridden a long way and meant to ride farther. When he reached the gate, he did not dismount. He did not speak English, or he pretended not to. He reached into his coat and he produced a folded paper, and he handed it down to Caleb without a word. Then he turned his horse and rode back the way he had come. Caleb watched him go. He unfolded the paper at the gate. His fingers were clumsy with cold. Inside was a single line of handwriting in a woman's careful script. They have arrested a Chiricahua woman in the Mesilla jail this morning. The charge is murder. The warrant was signed by Judge Vane. She has not been named in the filing. They are waiting for someone to come for her. 3 o'clock will not be enough today. Come now. Ada. Caleb stood at the gate with the snow coming down on the back of his neck, and he understood in one clean, terrible motion what Dorsey Pike had done. He had not arrested Tashina. Tashina was in the house. Tashina was at this very moment cooking beans. Caleb could see the smoke from her fire rising in a thin blue line above the chimney. Dorsey had arrested a woman who fit a description, a tall Chiricahua, in a jail 50 miles away, on a warrant from the brother, for a murder committed 3 years ago in a house in Silver Canyon behind a barn with a kitchen knife. He was not going to prosecute the woman in the jail. He was going to use her. He was going to let it be known very quietly to Caleb that he had a tall Apache woman in a cell and that he had the power to transfer her to the Silver Canyon court and to put her on the stand and to let her testify under whatever coercion she required that she was Tashina, and that she had killed a white man in 1884, and that she had buried him behind the barn with the help of her sister. Whether the woman in the jail said yes or no to any of this did not matter. The filing did not require her testimony. It required her body. A tall Apache woman produced in court at the right moment with the right story, fed to the right witnesses. It was the cleanest trap Caleb had ever seen, because if he rode to Mesilla to stop it, he left the ranch empty, and Dorsey would take the ranch by forfeit in his absence because the contract required continuous residence and 48 hours away was not continuous. And if he stayed, the woman in the Mesilla jail would be brought north and paraded through the Silver Canyon courtroom, and Tashina would be arrested on the evidence, and the sisters would both hang, and the ranch would go back to Pike, and everything Caleb had bled for would be finished. He walked back to the house. He walked in without knocking. He had not walked in without knocking in 3 months. Tashina looked up from the beans. She saw his face. She set the spoon down. "What?" he told her. Winema came out of the back room while he was talking. She had a basket of mending in her hands. She set it on the table and listened, and she did not sit down and she did not move. And when Caleb was finished, she said very quietly, "Who is the woman in the jail?" "I do not know." "Is she real?" "Ada says she is real. Ada would know." "Then Dorsey has taken a real woman, a stranger and innocent, and he is going to use her as a prop." "Yes." Winema's hand resting on the edge of the table went white at the knuckles. "Then whatever we do," she said, "we must do it in a way that does not kill her, because she has not done anything." Tashina looked at her sister for a long moment. Then she looked at Caleb. "She is right." "I know she is right," Caleb said. He sat down. His back was screaming. He let it. "We have 4 choices," he said. He laid them out. 1. Use the silver. 2 bars, 3 bars. whatever it took to hire a real lawyer out of Santa Fe. A lawyer Dorsey did not own. A man who could go to Mesilla and defend the unnamed woman and tear the filing apart on procedure alone. Problem: the silver gets seen. Dorsey finds out. He tears the ranch apart looking for the rest. The sisters end up dead. 2. Run. All 3 of them. Mexico, across the Rio Grande before the month is out. Problem: the woman in the jail is left to Dorsey. And the ranch is lost. And the treaty is lost. And 18 years of waiting is lost. And the next 2 Apache orphans, whoever they turn out to be, will be delivered to the next Dorsey Pike, and the wheel will turn again. 3. Take the copy of the treaty to the federal marshal in Santa Fe, Jonas Teague. The sisters had spoken of him once. A Union veteran. Not bent, not bought. Problem: Santa Fe is 120 miles north. 4 days up, 4 days back. 8 days. In those 8 days, the trial in Mesilla begins, the ranch sits unguarded, and the residence clause is violated. 4. Caleb paused. 4, he said. Tell us, Winema said. 4 is the one where we do all 3, at once, but not with the same people. He looked at them. Winema goes to Santa Fe with Ada. Ada has the contacts. She still knows men her husband knew. She can move the paperwork. Winema carries the treaty and the receipt and the letter Micah Vane will have written back by now, if he is going to write back at all. That letter, if it comes, will matter more than any of the rest. Winema and Ada ride for the marshal. They take the northern trail. It will be cold. It will be hard. It will be slow in the snow. But nobody will think to watch that trail, because no one has ever ridden it in winter. And me, Tashina said. You go south, to Mesilla, with Father Mendez. Father, the priest, in Mesilla, the one who held the real treaty for your grandfather. He still lives. Ada wrote to him in December. He knows about us. He is an old man, but he has a carriage, and he has standing in that town, and he has a black cassock, and nobody questions a priest and a nun. I am not a nun. You will be for 2 days. Tashina looked at him. You want me to walk into a Mesilla courtroom dressed as a Catholic nun. I want you to walk into the jail as a sister of mercy with Father Mendez to bring prayer and bread to the accused Indian woman. That is all. Just to see her, just to meet her. Because she is alone, Tashina, and she has not had anyone in that cell who has looked her in the eye. If we are going to save her life and yours, we need her to know that someone on the outside knows she is there. That is the beginning. And after that? After that you bring Father Mendez back here, and we wait. And you. I stay on the ranch. I do not leave. I sit on this porch for 5 weeks with a rifle across my knees, and I do not move, and I do not give Dorsey Pike 1 inch of reason to say the residence clause was broken. Tashina was quiet a long moment. You will be alone. Yes. He will come. I know. He will bring men. I know. He will not wait for the courtroom this time, because he knows the courtroom is only his plan B. Plan A has always been to get you to leave, or to get you dead. A dead buyer cannot claim the 6 months. I know. Caleb. She said his name the way she had said it in the barn that night, the way Winema said it now on the other side of the table, the way he understood now no one else in his life was ever going to say it again. You might not live, she said. 5 weeks is a very long time to stay in one place with a man like Dorsey Pike coming at you. I know. She took a breath. Then I have one condition. Name it. When I go to Mesilla, I take 1 bar of silver. 1. Not for a lawyer. For Father Mendez. He has a friend in the telegraph office in El Paso. That friend can send a wire to St. Louis for $50. We do not wait for the mail anymore. We do not wait for a reply by stage. We send a wire tonight. We tell Micah Vane exactly what is happening. We tell him his brothers have arrested a woman to frame another woman to steal a ranch. We give him the date of the Mesilla hearing. We tell him if he wants to save what is left of his family name, he has 14 days to arrive. Not to write. To arrive. Caleb looked at her. You are better at this than I am. I have had more practice, she said. I have been planning this for 18 years. You have been planning it for 3 months. He almost laughed. He did not quite. but the corner of his mouth moved. "All right," he said. "1 bar of silver, Father Mendez, a wire to St. Louis tonight. Tonight. And then you go south, and Winema goes north, and I stay here. And we come back. And you come back." She looked at him for a long time across the kitchen. "We will come back, Caleb Ross. I know. Do not die before we do. I will try not to." Winema rode out that afternoon with Ada Belknap. She wore a man's coat and a man's hat, and she carried a rifle across her saddle because a woman on the Santa Fe Road in January cannot afford to look like a woman. Ada drove a small covered wagon behind her. Inside the wagon, under a false bottom that Tobias Belknap had built into the floor 18 years ago for reasons he had never explained to his wife, was the oilcloth packet containing the copy of the 1868 treaty, the receipt from the Las Cruces lien collector, a sworn affidavit Caleb had written and Ada had notarized, and 3 unopened letters from St. Louis. The letters had arrived the morning before. Caleb had not opened them. He wanted Winema to deliver them to the marshal unread. He wanted it on record that the woman who carried them had not touched the seals. Tashina rode south 2 days later with Father Mendez in his black carriage. She wore gray wool and a white coif. She kept her eyes down. She was very tall for a nun. Nobody on the road said anything about it. Caleb sat on the porch. He sat on the porch for 5 weeks. He did not always sit. He worked. He mended. He fed the horses. He chopped wood slowly because of his back. He ate 1 meal a day and slept 4 hours a night and kept his rifle within arm's reach every moment he was outside the barn. Dorsey Pike came on the 9th day. He came with 4 men. He did not dismount. He rode up to the gate and sat his horse, and he called out, "Mr. Ross, I have come to inform you that there has been a development in a case in Mesilla that concerns the woman living on your property." Caleb stood up from the porch. He walked to the gate with his rifle held loose in his right hand, barrel pointed at the ground. "There is no woman living on my property, Mr. Pike. I was told there were 2. Whoever told you was mistaken." Dorsey smiled. The smile was very small and very tight. "Where are they?" "I do not know what you are talking about." "Mr. Ross?" "Mr. Pike." They looked at each other across the gate. Dorsey's horse shifted. One of his men put a hand on the butt of his revolver. Caleb did not move his rifle, did not raise it, did not lower it, just held it easy the way a man holds a tool he has used all his life. "I will be back," Dorsey said finally. "I know." Dorsey rode away. Caleb sat back down on the porch. He did not move for the rest of the day. Dorsey came back on the 16th day, with 7 men this time. They did not come to the gate. They came through the lower pasture at dawn on foot, and Caleb knew they were coming because he had laid 2 strands of tripwire along the south fence the week before, and a tin can full of pebbles had rattled at 4 in the morning. He was a miner. He knew about setting charges. He did not want to kill anyone. He had been clear with himself about this. Dead men make martyrs, and martyrs make deputies, and deputies make hangings. What he wanted was for these men to go home and decide in the privacy of their own thoughts that whatever Dorsey Pike was paying them, it was not enough. So he had prepared not weapons, but problems. A coyote hole widened slightly in the path the men would take from the lower fence. 3 broken bottles wrapped in oilcloth buried just under the surface in the narrow cut between 2 junipers. A length of old mine fuse and a 1/4 stick of dynamite left over from his last job in Leadville, buried 6 inches deep under a pile of dry brush at the mouth of the wash. He did not blow the dynamite. He never blew the dynamite. He only let them hear it hiss. When the hiss started at 4:17 in the morning by the light of a very small flickering fuse, the 7 men who had been creeping along the wash stopped and listened and ran. All of them. Back down the wash and out of the canyon and onto their horses and away. One of them left a rifle behind. One of them left a boot. Caleb let them go. He pulled the fuse before it reached the dynamite. He unburied the dynamite carefully and put it back in the tin box under the barn floor. He went inside the house for the first time in 5 weeks at dawn, and he poured himself a cup of cold coffee from the pot Tashina had left on the stove the day she rode south, and he drank it standing up, and he cried for about 90 seconds quietly with one hand braced on the kitchen wall, and then he stopped. Then he went back out to the porch. Dorsey did not come himself, not after that. He sent word through a rider on the 22nd day of the 5th month. The rider handed Caleb a folded paper at the gate. The paper said in careful legal English that the territorial court had set a hearing for the 28th day of the month in Mesilla, at which time the matter of a Chiricahua woman accused of the murder of one Mr. Ellis Granger deceased would be adjudicated, and at which time any party with evidence bearing on the said woman's identity or whereabouts prior to her arrest was compelled by writ to appear. Caleb read the paper twice. 28th, he counted, 6 days from today. The woman's name had been added, not her real name, the name on the filing. A Chiricahua woman going by the name of Tashina, daughter of Mongus, granddaughter of Standing Bear. Dorsey had gone ahead and named her. He had given the unnamed woman in the jail a name she had never used, and that name was the name of the woman Caleb had come to care for as kin. The woman Caleb had sworn to protect, though he had not yet said so and would not say so for another year yet. The writ compelled Caleb to appear. The writ compelled him to leave the ranch. 6 days before the 6 months were complete. He folded the paper. He walked back to the porch. He sat down. He thought for a long time. Then, for the first time in 5 weeks, he smiled, because Dorsey Pike had made a mistake. A small one, a procedural one, but a mistake all the same. The writ was issued in Judge Hollis Vane's name on Silver Canyon Courthouse stationery, and a Silver Canyon writ in New Mexico Territory in 1886 did not compel appearance in a Mesilla court. Jurisdiction did not cross counties without a federal endorsement, and a federal endorsement required a federal signature, and Judge Hollis Vane had no federal authority. The writ was not legal. It looked legal. It sounded legal. It would intimidate a man who did not know the law. But Tobias Belknap, 8 years dead, had explained the difference to Ada over supper one night in 1877, and Ada had explained it to Caleb in her back room in December, because Ada had understood even then that Dorsey's whole empire was built on paper that looked right and was wrong. Caleb set the paper down on the porch beside him. He did not leave the ranch. On the 27th day, Tashina came back. She came back in Father Mendez's carriage in her gray wool and white coif, and she was not alone. Beside her in the carriage was a small, thin woman with long black hair and eyes that had not slept in 2 weeks. The woman from the Mesilla jail. Father Mendez had used his standing and 1 bar of Standing Bear's silver and a very patient Jesuit sense of paperwork, and he had produced in the court at Mesilla a signed affidavit from the sheriff of Dona Ana County attesting that the accused woman, whose real name was Kaya of no fixed address, had been in the El Paso Mission House on the night of the alleged murder 3 years ago, and could not possibly have been in Silver Canyon because Father Mendez himself had heard her confession there the following morning. The affidavit was dated. The affidavit was notarized. The affidavit was backed up by 2 nuns and a washerwoman. The charge against Kaya had been dismissed on the 25th day. The charge against Tashina, daughter of Mongus, had nowhere to go, because no such woman had been produced, because the warrant had named a woman whose existence in court Dorsey Pike could not prove. Dorsey was not in Mesilla when the dismissal came down. He was in Silver Canyon waiting. He did not know yet. Kaya stayed in the carriage. Father Mendez tied the horses. Tashina got down. She walked up to the porch. Caleb stood up. They looked at each other. She did not touch him. He did not touch her. "Winema," she said. "Not back yet." "How long?" 6 days overdue. She absorbed this. "Dorsey." "Waiting." "You." "Still here." She nodded. "Once." "Then we finish it," she said. Winema came home the next morning. She came home in a column. There were 11 riders. Winema was at the front on a tall bay mare Caleb had never seen. Ada Belknap was next to her in the wagon, still driving. Behind them, in 2 columns of 4, rode 8 United States deputies in blue coats. Beside the lead deputy rode Marshal Jonas Teague, 50 years old, gray in the beard, a scar on the left cheek that ran from the corner of his eye down into his collar, and beside the marshal on a gray gelding rode a man Caleb had never seen in his life but recognized instantly. He was older than Dorsey, thinner, cleanly shaven. He wore an Eastern suit and a black overcoat and steel-rimmed spectacles. His face had the same bones as Dorsey's, the same jaw, the same brow. But where Dorsey's face was soft and pink and settled into the folds of 18 years of quiet wickedness, this man's face was hard and lined and quiet in a different way. The way a priest's face is quiet after 40 years of other people's confessions. Micah Vane. He had come. He had read the letter. He had received the wire. He had taken a train from St. Louis to El Paso, and a stage from El Paso to Las Cruces, and a horse from Las Cruces to Santa Fe. And he had sat in a room for 2 days with Marshal Jonas Teague and Winema and Ada Belknap, and he had produced from his attorney's satchel the federal filing copies of the 1868 treaty, which he had personally drafted 25 years before, and which he had kept all this time in a locked cabinet in a federal office in Washington. The forged papers in Dorsey's safe in Silver Canyon did not match the originals in Washington. They had never matched. They had been the same kind of counterfeit paper Dorsey Pike had been producing for a decade, and the government had simply never bothered to check because the government did not check on the affairs of 2 Apache girls on a 200-acre ranch in a nowhere canyon in the middle of New Mexico territory, until a letter arrived in St. Louis, until a wire arrived 2 weeks later, until a brother who had not spoken his own brother's names out loud in 25 years put down his pen and took off his reading glasses and said to his wife, "I have to go to New Mexico. I have to go today." The column reached the ranch gate a little after 10 in the morning. Marshal Teague dismounted first. He walked up to the porch. He saluted Caleb, a small, old-fashioned military salute which Caleb returned without thinking. "Mr. Ross, Marshal, I have warrants for the arrest of Dorsey Pike, attorney of Las Cruces, and Hollis Vane, justice of the Territorial Court at Silver Canyon. The charges include fraud, forgery, conspiracy to defraud the United States, witness tampering, and in the case of Mr. Pike, suspicion of accessory to the murder of Tobias Belknap in 1879. Ada Belknap, behind the marshal, pressed a hand to her mouth. She did not speak. She did not need to. "I am here to ask you," Teague continued, "whether you would be willing to ride with us into Silver Canyon this afternoon to serve the warrants. You are a material witness. Mr. Vane here has requested your presence." Caleb looked at the man on the gray gelding. Micah Vane dismounted. He crossed the yard. He climbed the porch steps. He stopped in front of Caleb. He held out his hand. "Mr. Ross, Mr. Vane." They shook. It was a long handshake. "My brothers," Micah said quietly. "I did not know. I did not know any of it. I left the territory in 1871 because I could not stand what Dorsey had become. And I told myself for 25 years that if I did my work well enough in Washington, if I helped enough of the other tribes, then whatever he was doing in the West would eventually be answered for by the law, because the law is the law, and I have given my life to it. I did not know. I should have known. I am old Mr. Ross, and I am tired, and I am ashamed. I have come to put this right as best I can." "Mr. Vane." "Yes. Your brother took nothing from me that I was not prepared to lose, but he took 18 years from those 2 women. Tell me you will see that their land is theirs and clear and permanent. Tell me that, and we are square, you and I." Micah Vane nodded once. "I will see it done. I will file the papers myself. I have brought the forms with me. By the end of next week, the title to Silver Canyon will be in the names of Tashina and Winema, daughters of Mangus, granddaughters of Standing Bear, and it will be written in such a way that no court in this territory or any other will ever be able to take it from them again." Caleb breathed out. He did not realize until he did it that he had been holding the breath for 3 months. "There is one more thing, Mr. Ross." Micah Vane opened his satchel. He produced a second folder, oilcloth wrapped, older than the first. "When I drafted the treaty in 1868, your grandfather took me up the north slope of the canyon one afternoon. He showed me something, a narrow seam of silver, running through the rock near the top of the ridge, not a large vein, but a real one, enough to keep a family." He opened the folder. He asked me to file it with the Bureau of Mines, in Washington, under his name, as a protected claim. I did. It took me 6 months. It has been sitting in a federal drawer untouched since January of 1869. Caleb stared at him. That claim is still active. The vein has belonged to the descendants of Standing Bear for 17 years. By federal law, not territorial law. Federal. No court in New Mexico could have touched it. My brother never knew. He thought the forged deed would give him access to whatever was in the ground. It would not have. It could never have. How much? At today's price of silver, $30,000. Perhaps a little more. Behind them on the porch, Tashina had come out of the house. She had heard the last part. She did not speak. She did not move. She just stood there in the doorway, one hand against the frame, and she looked at Micah Vane for a long moment, and then she looked at her sister Winema, who had come up beside her, and the two of them looked at each other the way two people look at each other when they have just understood at the same second that the thing they had been fighting for was not the thing they had thought. They had been fighting for a home. They had also, without knowing it, been fighting for a mountain. "Then let us ride," Caleb said quietly. They rode into Silver Canyon at 2 in the afternoon. Dorsey Pike was in his office above the feed store on Main Street with 3 of his men. He saw the column coming. He saw the blue coats. He saw his own older brother riding beside a United States Marshal. He saw Caleb Ross, whom he had tried and failed to break riding on the other side. He saw his younger brother Hollis already in the column in shackles, having been arrested on the courthouse steps 10 minutes earlier while eating a sandwich his wife had packed for him. Dorsey Pike drew a pistol from his desk drawer. He did not point it at the marshal. He did not point it at Caleb. He did not point it at his brother Micah. He pointed it at himself. Tashina, who had ridden in beside Caleb, saw this through the upstairs window of the feed store because Apache eyes are Apache eyes. She moved faster than any man in that column, and she was up the outside stairs of the feed store before the marshal had even called his men to dismount. She kicked the office door. It went off its hinges. She crossed the room in 2 strides. She took the pistol out of Dorsey Pike's hand before he could pull the trigger. She did not strike him. She did not break his arm. She did not even speak to him. She just took the pistol. And she looked at him. And Dorsey Pike, who had sold her family's land 4 times in 3 years, who had watched her carve her own face at 18 to make herself ugly enough to survive him, who had laughed at her when she told him about a man buried behind the barn, who had sent men to burn her out and to break her sister and to hang her for a murder she had done in self-defense, looked up at the tall Apache woman standing over him, and he wet himself, quietly, in his chair, in his soft pink hands, in his expensive waistcoat. Tashina did not mock him for it. She did not even seem to see it. She just handed the pistol butt first to Marshal Teague, who had come up the stairs behind her. "He is yours now," she said, and she walked out of the office. And she did not look back. The trial was held in Santa Fe, federal court. It took 3 weeks. Micah Vane did not argue the case himself because of the conflict of blood, but he sat at the prosecution table every day, and he did not miss a session. And when the verdicts came down on the last Thursday of March 1887, he wept quietly in his chair, one hand pressed over his mouth, and he did not try to hide it. Dorsey Pike was sentenced to hang. Hollis Vane, who had broken the moment the marshal had touched his shoulder on the courthouse steps, and who had told federal investigators everything he had done and seen for 18 years in exchange for his life, was sentenced to 20 years of hard labor at the federal prison in Leavenworth. Dorsey Pike was hanged on the first Friday of April at the federal prison yard in Santa Fe at 9 in the morning. Ada Belknap was there. She had ridden 3 days to see it. She wore a black dress and a black bonnet, and she carried a small cloth bundle in her lap. Caleb stood beside her at the back of the yard. He had asked if she wanted to be closer. She had said no. She wanted to see it, but she did not want his face to be the last thing she remembered. She did not speak for the whole hour before it happened. When the trap opened and the body dropped, she did not cheer. She did not cry. She did not look away. She opened the cloth bundle in her lap. Inside was a small tin of black tea. She held it for a moment. Then she closed it again. She put it back in her lap. She turned to Caleb. "Tobias can rest now," she said. Her voice was clear. Her eyes were dry. She had done her crying 7 years ago, and she had done it alone, and she did not need to do it again. Caleb did not answer. He put his hand on her shoulder, just for a moment. Then he took it away. She walked to her wagon. She climbed up. She took the reins. She drove south out of Santa Fe in the clear, cold spring morning, and she did not look back. The woman from the Mesilla jail. Kaya was released the same week with a formal apology from the territory and a cash payment of $50, which Ada Belknap personally drove south to hand to her, along with a job offer at the store, which Kaya accepted. The Treaty of 1868 was affirmed in federal court on the 10th of April. Title to Silver Canyon Ranch passed cleanly and in perpetuity to Tashina and Winema, and in the matter of Caleb Ross. The 6-month residence clause had been satisfied with 3 days to spare. He owned the ranch too. That was the awkward thing. The one thing the lawyers, even Micah, could not quite figure out how to square. Because the original treaty gave the land to the sisters, and the forged contract had given it to Caleb, and the law properly applied said that both were true and both parties held clear title to the same 200 acres. They settled it at the kitchen table. On a Sunday morning in May, with the cottonwood by the well coming into leaf, Tashina and Winema and Caleb sat with 3 cups of coffee between them. Caleb signed a deed. The deed conveyed his interest in Silver Canyon Ranch entire and in perpetuity to the 2 sisters for the sum of $1. Tashina paid him the $1. He put it in his pocket. Then Tashina signed a second deed. The second deed conveyed a 20-acre parcel at the south end of the property, including the well and the barn and the ranch house, to Caleb Ross, for the sum of $1. Caleb paid her the $1. She put it in her pocket. They shook hands. That was how it was settled. A year later. The spring of 1888. May. A wooden school building stood at the north end of the canyon, 30 yards from the creek, with 2 rooms and a stovepipe and 12 small desks built by a blacksmith named Winema and a retired clerk's widow named Ada. The school had 11 students, Apache, Mexican, Anglo, a Chinese boy whose father worked on the railroad up past the pass. The children sat in mixed rows, which had caused some talk in town the first month, and then no talk at all after that because the ranch was rich now, and rich things get forgiven in New Mexico territory faster than poor ones. Tashina had married in the fall. A Chiricahua man named Gray Eagle from the reservation up in Arizona. He was 32. He was a horseman and a carpenter and a widower. He had lost his wife and young son to cholera 4 years before. He and Tashina had met when he came through Silver Canyon with a trader's caravan and stopped to ask after water. He had stayed 2 weeks. He had come back in October. He had stayed for good. They lived in the ranch house. Tashina was expecting a child in July. Winema had not married. She had no plans to marry. She ran the forge she had built behind the barn, and she shoed horses for every rancher within 40 miles because there was not another farrier between Silver Canyon and Las Cruces, and her work was clean. In the evening she taught in the school. She was the better teacher of the 2 because Ada taught letters and numbers, but Winema taught the children the old names for things in Apache and in Spanish and in English, and the children came away understanding that a thing can have 3 names and still be itself. Caleb lived in a small cabin on his 20 acres. He had built it himself with Gray Eagle's help from Silver Canyon pine. It had 1 room and a sleeping loft and a porch that faced the morning sun. He kept 4 horses now, including the Apache mare Tashina had given him the day after Dorsey Pike was hanged. He raised them. He trained them. He sold them to the cavalry at Fort Bayard twice a year. He made a little money, not a lot. Enough. His back still hurt. It always would. But he could ride again for most of a day if the day was not too cold, and he could split wood if he took his time, and he could sleep without waking up most nights, which he had not been able to do since Leadville. Ada Belknap had closed the store in town and moved out to the ranch in February. She had a room in the ranch house off the kitchen which Gray Eagle had built for her because Tashina had insisted. Ada called Tashina and Winema her daughters now out loud in town where people could hear. She called Caleb her son. She would say it to strangers. She would dare them to question it. Nobody did. On the second Sunday in May, at the end of a long, warm day, Caleb sat on the porch of his cabin with a cup of coffee. Tashina walked up the path from the ranch house, slowly, her hands on the small of her back. She was 6 months along and carrying low, and it made her tired by evening. She sat down in the second chair beside him. She did not speak for a while. Neither did he. Down the canyon the light was going red along the tops of the mesas. The cottonwood by the well was full of leaves. The schoolhouse windows were open. Somewhere in the basin a single horse whinnied and another answered it. Tashina breathed out. Caleb Ross. Yes. You remember the day. Which day? The first day, when you opened the door. I remember. Did you ever imagine this? He looked out at the canyon. No, he said. Not this. Not any of this. I thought I had bought a place to die in quiet. I did not know I had bought a place to live in at all. She nodded slowly. My grandfather. Yes. He said the fourth man would hold. He did not say the fourth man would stay. Well, Caleb said. Maybe he knew. Maybe he did not. Maybe I decided myself. Tashina was quiet a while. Then she said very simply, We are glad you stayed. Caleb did not answer right away. He was looking at the iron plaque he had nailed to the porch post last month, the one he had forged himself at Weinma's forge with his own clumsy hammer. The letters on it were a little crooked. He had not been a blacksmith before this year. He was not much of one now, but the letters said what he wanted them to say. The Iron Oath. No person is property here. He looked at the plaque a long time. Then he looked at Tashina. I am glad I stayed too, he said. She reached over. She put her hand on his. Not as a wife, not as a lover. They had never been that. They would never be that. What they were was something older and quieter and stronger than any of those words. They were people who had each walked into a room once carrying nothing and had decided between one breath and the next to set down what they had left and stand with each other until it was finished. It was finished. They sat on the porch with their hands touching, and they watched the last of the sun go down behind the western mesa. In the ranch house half a mile away, Ada Belknap was calling the children in for supper. Winnemah was walking up the path from the forge with soot on her cheek and a hammer in her hand. Gray Eagle was coming down from the north pasture with 2 horses on a lead. A lamp was being lit in the kitchen window. Smoke was rising straight up from the chimney in the still spring air. A canyon in New Mexico territory. A house that nobody owned and everybody did. A ranch that had been bought with $600 in a signature. Nobody read, and a lie nobody noticed, and a promise nobody intended to keep, and which had become, despite all of that. Despite everything. A place where the bell rang for supper, and the children came running, and nobody was anybody's property, and nobody ever would be again. Caleb Ross drank the last of his coffee. He set the cup down on the porch rail. He smiled. It reached his eyes. For the first time in a long time,